It's been 10 years since the state held its last black bear hunt. Wildlife officials are weighing whether to stage another, but some advocates are strongly opposed. Here to discuss it is Adam Sugalski. He's the founder and executive director of the advocacy group OneProtest, who's opposed to the hunt. Welcome, Adam.
Oh, welcome. Thank you for having me on today.
We're also going to incorporate some voices today of people who support the hunt. We also welcome your calls and comments. You can reach us at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect at wjct.org, or you can reach out on Instagram, Facebook, or X at FCC On Air. Adam, state officials say that the bear populations in the state are flourishing after years of hunting restrictions, and that some controls on this population are needed. What is your take on that?
Well, I kind of disagree with that because even by the FWC even says they have incomplete bear data and the population numbers won't be assessed. The populations won't be like finalized until 2030, and then they'll know how many bears there are. So this to me is a very premature action to actually have a bear hunt when you don't know the numbers. It goes against their conservation, scientific organization. But why are they doing this when they don't have the numbers?
So there hasn't been, as you say, this sort of updated bear count, but at its December presentation of its Florida Black Bear Management Plan, the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission told the board that basically the bear population is about 5 times above the minimum population objectives, which are the standards set to maintain a healthy bear
Mhm.
population. And so whether there's an exact count or not, their assessment is that it is a healthy enough population that it could withstand some culling.
Well, in our minds, this is a trophy hunting, is what they're basically talking about. Bears regulate their own populations by delayed implantation when a female is impregnated. If there's a lot of food, she might have more cubs. If there's not a lot of food, she might not have any cubs. So we think bears can regulate their own populations, and we don't need a bunch of people in the woods killing bears for trophy, for bragging rights. And we want them to be left alone. They're an umbrella species. They're very important to the ecosystems. And that's our stand. It's a trophy hunt. Bears don't need to be culled this way.
So bear sightings and bear-related calls to FWC, that's the Florida Fish and Wildlife
Mm.
Conservation Commission, they say that those are at an all-time high, those calls, up 42% from 2016. Not all of them negative, though. Those are those, you know, whether they're calling to report a sighting versus whether they're calling to complain, those numbers haven't really changed.
And a lot of those numbers are from when people, it's like bear-proof trash cans. A lot of these calls can be mitigated if people will actually put their trash away. And when you build new homes near the woods, and you don't put your trash away, what do you expect is going to happen? Bears are kind of lazy. They want a free meal, and they're going to like go through your trash. And so this is a people problem, not a bear problem. And I think when you have these calls, it's like, what's our first solution to get a bullet and kill a bear because we're not doing what we should be doing? We should blame ourselves for these issues, not bears.
So Florida has some 17,000 square miles of bear habitat. I guess only about half or maybe a little less than that is actually protected, though. Is that right?
I'm not actually sure those numbers, but I know with bear habitat, a lot of it's fragmented. So you might have roads going through. So it's very hard for these different bear populations to kind of integrate with each other. So, but I don't know. There is private land versus public land, like Ocala, Osceola, those kind of forests, which I know that's where I think they are protected.
So it's unclear, I guess, at this point, we should say, whether FWC is going to ultimately recommend this bear hunt to the board. So they went in December, they made their presentation of this bear management plan. At the time, they were not recommending a bear hunt. I
Mm.
mean, the staff was not recommending a bear hunt to the board, but the board said they wanted a discussion of that anyway. And they basically gave the directive to staff to say, come back with a proposal that at least looks at the possibility of a bear
Mhm.
hunt.
Yes, and they've been having meetings that way, meetings getting public input with hunters. I've been on several of those meetings. They're asking what kind of like weapons would you use? An arrow, bow, black powder? When would you want to have the hunt? And for your average person, these questions like, well, I mean, what we think, especially with art, when I spoke, one of them, archery is horrible for bears. I think it's a misconception that people have that, you shoot a bear with a bow and it goes down. I mean, unless you hit a direct heart shot, but bears most times they get shot through the lung and they'll suffocate in their own blood and run off. And no hunter, they're not going to chase a wounded bear in the woods. That's kind of a given because the bear will be defensive, will be angry. So those are some of the questions they asked. So we think they're going to come back in the May meeting, May 21st and May 22nd, which we encourage everybody to go to the FWC meeting. Everyone can go to beardefenders.org and get any information about our petitions and calls to action. I just want to put that in there. Um, so, back to the point as far as with the FWC having the hunt, Gary Lester was a commissioner, really, one commissioner is really pushing this. And so that's where we're kind of also, we don't know what's behind that. I think he's probably getting pressure from his constituents
Yeah, and
with the
he was
hunt.
the one who said at that meeting, he said, I'll be very succinct. I would like to see a proposal from staff for a bear hunt.
Yeah.
So we should say we reached out to the to Florida Fish and Wildlife, and they said they quote could not accommodate a request for a comment at this time. But we do know that there is support for a hunt. Mark Barton with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers has spoke at that same December meeting, and he said that the bear population is thriving and it could easily support a limited and highly regulated bear hunt. Let's hear a little bit more of what he had to say.
I'm disappointed that the staff presentation did not include hunting as a management tool for black bear, especially in the areas where the populations are too high. I understand this is a controversial topic and you probably would rather not deal with it, but you have to. It's not only a waste to allocate state resources to deal with nuisance bears and clean up vehicle collisions and things like that, but it's unfortunate that the bear should suffer this kind of a fate, and this can be mitigated by reducing the populations where it's needed.
So what do you say to that?
I love how he's like, oh, he mentions about bears suffering and mitigate the damage. Well, so you going in the woods and blowing it away with a shotgun or 308 or hitting with an arrow, that's not doing damage to the bear. So, I mean, we have this, deer populations have to be managed by people because there are no more predators. We pretty much killed off all the predators. So they can't really self-manage, but bears can self-manage, like I mentioned before. So we're just diametrically opposed to bear hunting. We think they're under enough pressure from development, everything else. I'd wish some of these hunters would actually take the opposite view and want to protect them. I mean, everyone's very short-sighted. Like we're looking at the next few years. What's Florida going to look like in 50, 100 years? And when are we really going to take a hard look and protect these ecosystems where the bears are? Because we protect bears, we protect a lot of other species that they're around.
The confrontations that, bears have with humans are most often occurring in places where there has been development, in subdivisions, in residential areas that have perhaps, are adjacent to or perhaps have encroached on some traditional wild areas. But, these hunts would be taking places in more densely forested places, I guess, and not necessarily in the areas where we're seeing these. Um,
Nuisance bears, basically what they call them. No, you're absolutely right. The bears that they're going to go after are in the woods, not bothering anybody. The bears they're talking about, I mean, they're not going to be next to a neighborhood shooting a bear coming down the street. So there's a little bit, I think, their arguments, they're saying they want to help, mitigate these, but yet they're going to be going after the bears that aren't causing any problems.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about a possibility of bringing a bear hunt back to Florida, a black bear hunt. And if you'd like to join our conversation, we welcome your calls and comments. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. We have a call from Susan Hargreaves. Good morning, Susan. Go ahead.
Good morning. I have been fighting and attending the FWC meeting since 1986, and it might be shocking to a lot of your listeners to learn that most of them are hunters, and you would think that conservation and hunting are absolute opposites, and that's because they are. And having hunters making decisions about killing bears is so wrong. And that is why we once again are facing this battle. And so many organizations are united against this. And our Animal Hero kids, a lot of the children spoke out against killing bears at the last one. And everyone may remember how the images of all of the bears being killed went around the world.
Yeah.
And
Thanks, Susan. I mean, those are some of the images that you, in fact, collected yourself, Adam. Can you talk a little bit about, first of all, what happened the last time there was a black bear hunt in Florida, and just remind us of kind of what happened, and also how you were able to get some of the images that you were.
Well, they hadn't hunt in 2015 was the first hunt they had in over 20 years because they'd stopped all bear hunting because they were being pretty much wiped off the face of Florida. So they had a hunt in 2015. I went to check station 17 in Lake City and documented the bears being killed. In the first one I took a picture of was a lactating female. So obviously there was no cubs with her. So we don't know what happened to her cubs. So those images did go around the world. I got interviewed by several papers in the UK. There's a story Australia, France, Germany. I even talked to someone who was on the Sea Shepherd ship fighting on the whale wars. He called me from the ship to congratulate me on getting the images and protesting. And then in 2016, we went to the meetings. Our group spearheaded, along with the other groups, 28 city protests all around Florida at the same time. And then because of the images, the protesting, all these people speaking at meetings, and they finally decided. Brian Yablonsky, the chairman, decided to call a hunt off. It was like 3-3, three commissioners for it, three against it. He was a tiebreaker, and one of the things he said was like, hunters, you have a lot of great hunting opportunities in Florida, and maybe Floridians just can't stomach a bear hunt. They don't want it, and so he sided with the populace not to have it because the super majority of Floridians are against this. Hunters make up less than 1% of the population of Florida, and Susan did make a good point where she talked about like you have this conservation commission when it's made up of land developers, attorneys. I don't see one conservationist on the commission. Like, why don't they have a biologist, someone? So it's kind of a very skewed commission. That's very, one thing I like to say with them is like, in their minds, like, conservation does not begin and end with a bullet. It's like, but that's the way these organizations think, and we think, the public needs to get more involved in these decisions.
Well, you talk about a supermajority of the state not supporting black bear hunting of this kind, and yet just recently in November, the state voters approved Amendment 2, which is known as the right to hunt and fish. That got a 67% approval of voters, the supermajority that was
Yep.
required to put it into the Constitution. It basically makes hunting the, quote, preferred means of wildlife management. So how do you square those two things?
That amendment was so vague. I had so many people that voted for it accidentally. They didn't know if you read the amendment. It was very confusing. It's very blanket. So I don't know. So what? So now you can just hunt and whenever you want, and that like the preferred method. I don't really understand. Like it's very confusing what that actually means. So, but then also to remember happened HB 87 passed, which is the one where basically right now there's already a stand your ground law where if you're in your property and a bear attacks you, you protect yourself and kill the bear. HB 87 allows you to kill a bear if you feel threatened or it's damaging your property. So if a bear walks in, starts pushing on my fence, well, I can just shoot it now. And there's no investigation. The FWC might not even come out and pick up the body. So bears are already under pressure from that now. And to actually do a hunt, like it's too much for them. I think we need to really put the brakes on this.
So you mentioned HB 87, and that was signed into law by the governor last year. That basically is kind of known as the Self-Defense or Stand Your Ground Against Bears Act. It allows for someone, if they feel threatened and they're on their property, to kill a bear, and it basically prevents the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission from investigating as they typically would be able to. It was sponsored by in the House by Representative Jason Schoaf, and he had sort of a comedic take on the legislation and the need for it. Let's just take a little listen back to that meeting from the last
Bears
legislative
on
session.
crack. I'm sure the bears on crack quote.
This bill is not about bears. We keep saying it. We love bears. Bears are cute and cuddly and an amazing creature. This is about a nuisance bear. We're talking about the ones that are on crack and they break your door down and they're standing in your living room growling and tearing your house apart. So when you run into one of these crack bears, you should be able to shoot it.
So obviously, there haven't been any reports of bears on crack. There had been a movie called Cocaine Bear that perhaps I was inspired by. It was not clear that he was, 100% serious about
Yeah.
those comments, but he did believe that there was a right for people, if a bear comes on your property and is threatening you or your loved ones, which is kind of the language of the supporters, that you should have a right to protect yourself. What do you say to people who believe that they should have a right to protect themselves?
That law already exists. Stand your ground. That the law exists. Now, if it happened before HB 7, the FWC would investigate. So now there's no more investigation. So I can say anything. I can lie, admit, well, I felt threatened, and I just killed a bear. So it kind of wipes away any accountability for the person.
It would have to be on your property, although I guess it could be an expansive piece of property depending on how large of a landowner you are.
Well, also too, if you're walking through the national park and a bear attacks you and you have a gun, you can shoot it. Right before that, you could, and the FWC would investigate, ask questions. But now you don't have, there's nothing. Like you can say, well, I felt threatened, it got near me.
I want to circle back a little bit to the constitutional amendment that voters approved, that right to hunt and fish. How did that change things in terms of the management plan of Florida Fish and Wildlife or the priorities of perhaps the board members? Is that constitutional amendment impacting how they look at the bear population?
That's something I really can answer because I don't know that. I have never, I haven't heard them using that to push a bear hunt, but I'm assuming it's in the back of their minds. And they will, I'm sure that this argument will be used at the May meeting when hunters go up and speak for the hunt. But there'll also be hunters speaking against it. I know there are hunting groups that are not, I've heard hunters that are, they're deer hunters, but they don't like bear hunting.
But if the constitutional amendment requires that hunting be the preferred means of wildlife management, does that somewhat constrain the options that they have if they're looking to manage the bear population, if hunting is, designated the
Mm.
preferred means by law?
Yeah, that is a good point, and I think that will be what the commissioners determine whether they'll outweigh the public versus the hunter's wishes. Because you're right, it says that, but I think the commissioners do have, they can vote against it. Like they do have a choice to push a hunt or not a hunt.
So today we mentioned earlier, there begins a series of public comment sessions. There was this meeting in December, there was another meeting in March. Ultimately, we're moving towards a decision that would be made sometime at these meetings in May. But what's happening over the starting today and over the next few days?
Well, I know they're having meetings where they're wanting public input on what a hunt would look like how many days, what weapons, locations, times, that kind of thing. That's what they're getting inputs. What happened was they had a meeting a few weeks ago. There were so many people, like 500 people were on the meeting. I think they realized there was too many and it's hard to manage. So I'm assuming they're doing more meetings to get more public input. So they can say, hey, we listen to people, and they can present a hunt to the commissioners on May 22nd, 21st and 22nd.
And what do we know about kind of what public comment, what purpose it serves in these decisions? How are the comments collected, used to formulate a decision or a recommendation?
Well, what I've seen is they're basically getting all the top comments, and I think they're going to collect. And then I don't know how they're doing the input, but I'm sure they're going to put it into like a spreadsheet and figure out it's okay. So like 50% at this time, they'll probably just like dissect all the comments and then propose to the commissioners. This is what the hunters, how they want to see hunt, when they want to see hunt, and what weapons they want.
What decisions do you think are going to matter to these commissioners when they make this decision?
I think I think there is time to put pressure on them, to talk to them, call them, comments. There's like I said, if you go to our website, beardefenders.org, we will have like calls to action, how you can reach out to the commissioners. And then if you sign the petition will keep you updated on new things happening with the proposed bear hunt. So we think it's like last time, we have to make our voices heard. We think that wildlife is a trust for all Floridians. It's not just owned by the hunters, and so we want to see at the table for this.
The population of Florida, during the time of the bear population decreasing, increased, and they're sort of happening on two separate tracks. Between 1960 and today, the population grew from about 5 million people in Florida to about 20 million people. And up until, the 70s, bears were really moving towards extinction. Can you remind us just about what the effort was to mitigate the decline of bears, what measures were put into place, and then just more about the interaction between the growing population of Florida?
Well, the reason, because bears really had no protections back then, so anyone could kill a bear. There was no seasons, and so they were being poached a lot, and so basically that's when they put the brakes on. So bears did have protections, and I think when a species is protected, it'll you still have bad actors going after them, but your average hunter probably will not take a bear, and so they did rebound, and so we think with the population growing in, you're getting these more bear interactions with the garbage cans, like I mentioned before, human bear conflicts. And if people put their trash away and be mindful and to coexist with the bears, I think we can get rid of a lot of these issues we're having with bears being called in. It's like a problem we've solved. And I
Or
think
created?
we created, we need to fix it ourselves without the end ultimately just killing a bear.
I mean, there are some practical tips. You talked about bear trash cans, and those, there are some that are sold that can help prevent bears from getting into like an easy snack like that.
Yeah.
But there's also some things I don't think people traditionally realize or think about, like bird feeders.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the interactions that are problematic and ways that people can control that?
Well, bird feeders, your grill, like if you have a really dirty grill, the bears might come and dig through that. If you leave your garage open, you have dog food in there, and like we've seen it where a bear was in someone's garage and the woman was walking her dog and I think she fell or something. That was a few years ago. But usually it's things that we can fix by just being more mindful that there are bears in the area and can we put our the attractants away to keep these interactions from happening.
Yeah. Susan, I know that you've been holding there and you wanted to give some information about bear numbers. Go ahead, Susan.
Yes, on May 4th, there's a rally at Lake Eola Park at 12 noon in Orlando. That's a rally for the Bears. My experience with the FWC since 1986 makes me aware that they are going to go ahead with a bear hunt, and it's an actual farce to pretend to ask people what they feel about that. Because the last bear hunt, the majority of speakers and everyone who contacted them were against the hunt, and they still went ahead and did that. And I really don't even want to call it a hunt because it was really more of a massacre in the woods where grandfather bear was killed, and as Adam said, a lactating female, cubs, bears were baited, and that's what they basically discussed on the last call, how to kill bears. When would you like to kill bears? What season would you like to kill bears? Would you like to use a pneumatic device? Would you like to use dogs? And the people who were against the bear hunt were actually weeded out and filtered out of that last call. So it is a farce. You do have foxes in the hen house. The difference is foxes need to eat to live. And in this case, we have people who were appointed, not elected, by the governor to oversee animals who they would like to kill for fun.
Susan, thank you. We also have a comment from Scott on Facebook. He says hunting is legally allowed in Florida, and bears are a game animal. Adam's stories are largely propaganda. What do you say to that, Adam?
It's propaganda. So, like a lot of these bear hunters, like their goal is like, let me kill a bear and then show it off, like bragging rights, like holding it up. It's like, it kind of like we have diametrically opposed opinions. I want to protect these animals and make people want to kill them for fun. It's a trophy to them. No one is surviving off of bear meat, bear fat. We don't need bear rugs. When I was at the one check station, one guy killed a bear, cut the paws off, and threw it out. And it's like just for the trophy. So I'm trying to protect these species. These people want to kill them like it's for a rush.
So these series of meetings that are going to begin today, or I guess rather be continued today, to your point, April 2nd, April 3rd, April 5th, those are all virtual meetings that people can participate in. Are you encouraging people? I mean, it sounds like Susan is a little bit more skeptical about the value of participating.
Well, we think it's important for people to understand how what they are doing. So you listen to the meeting, so now you know. And you know, do I think they're going to have a hunt? I think they will push one, but I think there's time to get the commissioners to push back against it. But I don't know, especially with the amendments and everything else. The preferred amendment. Hunting.
What are the lobbying influences or the pressures that commissioners are facing? I mean, in this instance, we're hearing a lot of people who oppose. There have been some voices from the hunter community advocating for it as a tradition, something that has been done for generations as part of their heritage. But very often we hear a lot of voices opposed. So what are the pressures that are on each side, and who is it primarily hunters, advocacy groups that they're hearing from?
Well, the FWC, know from last time they were pressured by the NRA and the SCI, which is Safari Club International. I remember Marion Hammer, a lobbyist for the NRA, stated that children could not go outside and play because bears were terrorizing neighborhoods. Like the last call, the hunter guy who just messaged, like talk about propaganda. That is pure propaganda from the NRA. And the Safari Club International is a glorified trophy hunt where you can basically like get a luxury trophy hunt, go to this log cabin, bid on it, and shoot like a bear in luxury. It's like, what is that about? So the commissioners are hearing from those groups, and I think they need to hear from the public, the people. That's where I think the pressure will come from.
Well, those meetings, as we said, start today. We have information about how people can participate on our website. You can also go to myfwc.com/hunting/bear or email bear comments at myfwc.com. Also, some good tips on those sites about how to limit bear interactions with humans. Adam Sugalski, thanks so much for being here today. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on and giving the bears a voice.
All right.